Hi everyone, CB Smith here, and I'm here once again with a special person in my life, TB Smith.
Good morning. Well, it's morning now.
Yeah, we are doing what I am now calling closing the book on our watch along for Blade that we recorded back on Super Bowl Sunday. And we have here with our cranberry vodka. Well, it's in the morning, so it's non-alcoholic vodka, so it's just cranberry juice. But you mentioned before that you felt like drinking cranberry vodka while watching the movie.
Yeah, I mean, because the whole soundtrack of that movie is a 90s club mix, so, it only seemed right.
It only seemed right, so that's why we're celebrating with the drinks. I'm going to go through a little bit about Blade's history, and then we're going to go through the novelization that I just read and finished and got my notes together for. So, let's start off. Blade first appeared in issue 10 of Tomb of Dracula in 1973. You can tell by your eyes rolling, this is very interesting history for you.
I mean, I was not even a thought in the universe. My mother was born in 1972, so.
So she was born around the same time as Blade.
Yes, I guess so.
Yeah. He wasn't originally a half vampire. He was actually a human, British, not American. He wore a sporty green trench coat, and he was called Blade because he had wooden knives as weapons to hunt vampires. Wooden knives. Yep.
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but okay.
No, it didn't look that great either in the art. It was just knives colored brown. It didn't look very good.
Insert picture.
Over the years, there have been some changes. They did have the story about his mom being pregnant with a vampire and then bitten by one, which didn't turn him into a half vampire, but it did make him immune to vampire bite. Now, the whole Daywalker origin has a pretty convoluted history. Our scriptwriter for the movie, David S. Goyer, he had an unfilmed script at Marvel for years, and it was floating around, and this is where we get Whistler, this is where we get the half-vampire storyline from, and someone at Marvel found that script and thought, hey, I'm working on the Spider-Man cartoon. Let's put all the Blade stuff in there. Babe, have you ever seen the 90s Spider-Man cartoon?
No, I don't think so. Maybe, is that the one where the meme and they're all pointing at each other?
No,
Okay.
that was the 70s one, no. No, 90s Spider-Man was quintessentially the most 90s thing I ever saw. I watched the Blade episodes in between doing this video, and I don't know how to describe it other than it constantly moves and never shuts up, and yet it's still very stilted.
So you?
So me. Yes. Exactly. Well, I am a child of the 90s.
Well, there you go.
There we go. So, 1996, Blade comes in 2 episodes of Spider-Man fighting Morbius, because Morbius was morbing up the place in New York. Blade shows up, and because this is the 90s, no one's allowed to have any actual weapons. It's all lasers. It's contemporary New York City, but the cops have lasers. Blade doesn't have an actual blade. It's a laser sword, and he has a crossbow where the bolts are real, but the actual bolt wire that pushes the bolt out is a laser.
So I'm trying to figure out why you're explaining this to me.
Yeah.
Is this because of like the anti-violence movement?
Yes.
Or I was like cops having guns or something like that. I was thinking maybe Rodney King, but it's just the 90s anti-violence
Yes,
movement.
there was a whole anti-violent movement that started in the mid-'80s and into the
games,
90s.
all
Yeah.
that stuff. Gotcha.
So into the 90s, a lot of 90s shows, they didn't want to do anything to be like, they didn't want to fight that. They were just like, what if we make it lasers? And because lasers
So it's
weren't a
Star
thing.
Wars now.
Yeah.
Got it.
Contemporary New York City, Spider-Man's fighting people with lasers. Yeah. All right. So this is also where we get Whistler showing up because it was in the original script. And the other thing about the 90s cartoons is that everyone is ripped. Everyone is buff. Whistler, he still has a bum leg in the cartoon, right? But I don't know what steroids he's trying to put in his leg, but it's moving into his chest and biceps. It is incredible. I'm going to show a picture, but it is just buck wild. The amount of just buff everyone is, from Blade to Spider-Man to Whistler, everyone, except for the female lady cop. No, she has to be skinny. Blade's official transformation in the comics technically precedes the movie by like 3 months. in Peter Parker, Spider-Man number 8, 1998. In this one, Morbius is again morbing up the place. And under mind control, he bites Blade. And because Morbius became a vampire not through traditional means, this allowed Blade to become a half vampire. That was their explanation.
Okay, so they pretty much retconned everything else.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Typical Marvel Comics, retconning everything, especially for movies. Yeah, like in the Spider-Man movies, when they did organic web shooters, the comics basically made Peter give birth to himself with a giant spider monster lady.
Okay, that's for another time.
That's for another time.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so I read the novelization. It is by a guy named Mel Odom. He's from Oklahoma, which is already a red flag for me.
Oh.
I'm
sorry if anyone's from Oklahoma.
I'm sorry for anyone who's from Oklahoma. I'm sorry you live in Oklahoma. I spent 6 months at Fort Sill, man. I can't do it. I'm sorry.
You just lost 5 subscribers.
I'm flattered that we have that many. So Mel, he's actually a pretty chill dude. He has occasionally done original works, but most of his bread and butter comes from doing novelizations, a lot of video games. He did some tabletop games, so he did some D&D. He did some video game.
Okay.
Yep, he did some video game novelizations like Diablo. He also did Sabrina the Teenage Witch. The TV universe had some novels he wrote. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, NCIS. And then he also wrote some spin-off novels from our favorite to joke, but we never read or watched anything, the Left Behind series. Yeah, he wrote a couple spin-off novels for that as well. And one of the interesting things about the novel was that he wrote an entire introduction and basically just gave us a whole behind the scenes about the movie, talking about all the script changes that came about. And I'll explain as I go along with the novel. Like, you can feel all of the different changes he had to like quickly scrap and change over.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like it was like I was very surprised that there was just so much. He just was like, yeah, and then this and that, and then this and that.
Is he still alive?
I think so. I'm not sure. The end of the novel, he does have his AOL email because
Stop it.
The 90s was very different.
Stop
People could just have their email address.
Well, at least it's AOL and not Hotmail.
That is true. So then after that introduction, he does have an author's note and where he dedicates the book to his kid at the time.
Aww.
Yeah, little
kid
Shiloh.
At the time.
Well, yeah, he has 3 kids.
Oh, you made it seem like kid at the time, like the kid disappeared.
Oh, it's been 30 years. I like to think he's not a kid anymore.
All right, fair enough.
But little Shiloh was like 8 years old when he started writing this, and he talks about in the novel, like, I dedicate this to my son because we love video games, we love superheroes, we love hanging out and doing all that nerd stuff.
Aww.
Very wholesome and very sweet. I don't know why he chose Blade to do the dedication to.
He probably figured, well, this one's going to be a hit, so.
I mean, he was right. It was a big hit. It's just the content in it. I'm like, I don't know if my 8-year-old would be reading this. So we finally are talking about the book itself, which, you know, as we know from the movie, is introduced in the hospital in the 60s, where that actress lady, I forgot her name, the one from Love and Basketball.
Oh, Sanaa Lathan.
Sanaa Lathan, yes.
Yes.
First, we're introduced to Dr. Hunley, who is treating Sanaa Lathan. It's morning in my cranberry, not vodka. So I want you to imagine that scene in the movie where she's like, the blood's coming out, right? And the face is getting white from all the blood loss and stuff. And then this is where Dr. Hunley says her face was torn by fear and pain, but he knew that she was pretty.
I mean, if I'm picturing Sanaa Lathan, yes, that's very true.
It's just
while a woman's dying while giving birth, probably not my first thought.
Yeah, with her throat ripped out from a vampire bite. Yeah, there's a weird consistency of black women in pain, and then also describe them as very pretty. Mel, I don't know what you were doing, but 30 years later, I'm calling you out on this, buddy. But we also do get like a little, not first person, but we do get a perspective of Blade inside the womb.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so it describes as like his transformation as being like very painful and stuff, and the book describes it as like a venom coming in and transforming his body. So you mentioned Twilight a couple times.
Yes,
in the OG video.
that's exactly what I just thought of. I was like, oh, it's given Renesmee.
Yeah.
All I could think about is that animatronic baby. Insert picture of that thing. You already probably know it, but yeah, it's similar. I wonder if Stephanie Myers took some inspiration from this.
You think that she read the Blade novel in the 90s?
I don't know if she
like,
read the whole novel, but maybe in her very loose research, she was like, maybe I'll add an element of this in there.
There's something to that venom bit.
Yeah.
So then we go back to the modern day, 1998, where we get our in your words, scrawny ass white boy.
Oh, the one who's going to get sacrificed in the club?
Yeah. Because in the club, they're all food in this one. Normally in the club, we're all fam, but in this one, we're food.
Oh, God. I think this is the second time you made that joke, and I hated it both times.
So we learn that his name is Dennis, and he is an actor, and we find out finally, because throughout that whole video, we're like, where is it set in? Mm-hmm. It is New York.
Yeah, okay, all right.
But it's New York, written by a guy from Oklahoma.
Right.
Based off of a script of a guy living in L.A. And I will explain later on when we get to a part. But yes, he's in New York. He's an actor, and he goes to the butcher shop, butcher warehouse where the club is, and they notice that like everyone who works at that warehouse, like they're all pale and tired and stuff. So it's like implied like they're all being fed on. And this was the big change. One of the bigger changes was the music, instead of being 90s techno, it was going to be like 90s goth rock.
Okay.
Which I'm very happy they changed it to techno.
Yeah, I don't think that would have the same appeal in the movie.
No. Like, it feels very, like, not modern. Like, it's definitely a testament of its time. But
right.
Also, like, I've watched a lot of horror movies that try doing the goth metal aesthetic, both in the 90s and early 2000s. And for whatever reason, that makes it feel more dated than the techno.
Because that's not what you were listening to in a mainstream club.
Yeah.
And it just would have probably felt like a fever dream.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, the goth aesthetic does pop in from time to time in the novel. And as we go through the story, I'll drop that off. Then, let's see, Blade shows up and does the fighting. We have Quinn, our favorite bad guy character.
We're gonna jack you up. What we do?
Who, this is the part about the script being changed, because right now it's described as him being like a big, like, inaudible henchman guy.
Okay.
Instead of like that quippy, like, I have a new hand.
He's my favorite villain in this whole movie.
He's so good.
Because Deegan's
he's not
insufferable.
We do learn more about Deegan as we go on. So they do the fight, and then they go to the hospital, and we have Dr. Karen and Curtis. Now I remember you and I were like, well, Curtis is trying, but he's not very good at the flirting.
It's not even just that. Apparently, like, when we really thought about it, it's like they have a history together.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe went on a few dates. And maybe they did the devil's tango. Who knows? But I was just like, this is the guy? Like, this is who we're going to pick? I don't know.
So your red flags actually came off pretty good, because in the book, he's much more of a sleazeball. He's described as constantly looking down Dr. Karen's blouse, trying to look up her skirt.
Oh.
Yeah, he's a scumbag. We don't like Curtis. One of our favorite lines from the movie was, motherfucker, you out of your damn mind.
Motherfucker, are you out of your damn mind?
When Blade gets shot in the hospital. Mel instead has, I guess from the original script, Blade just goes, what the fuck are you doing? Which, that's not as good.
No, that doesn't even give Wesley Snipes.
No.
That gives Oklahoma. If I'm being honest.
So Mel Odom's writing style to me feels very much like it gives little boy energy.
Okay. Explain.
So there's a lot of what's the word? Not mediocre, but like good enough pulp fiction writers where they want to write about all like the cool, violent sex stuff, right? But they're also like kind of awkward about it, because
right.
It's like, well, I don't want to like talk about all that stuff. Like, I'm not trying to open up about that. So we get lines like, Blade knew that the only way he could survive in the world what's become the void that was the epitome of martial arts.
Glad they took that out of the movie.
But like that it gives off that like, imagine like a 12, 13-year-old boy from the suburbs being like, yeah, he does kung fu and swords and guns and stuff.
But slightly elevated verbiage and adjectives.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So honestly, if Mel kept that 7th grade ass line energy like throughout the whole book, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But I also understand that because you have a lot of these script changes and you have to like quickly, change things out, like I get that like this isn't like your top A game.
Right. But did he work on the script as well?
He did not. No.
Oh, okay.
With novelizations, a lot of times it's like they get hired out midway through production, and they have to like churn that stuff out real quick.
So it comes out around the same time.
Yeah.
Got it.
So when we get to the ancient vampire little
The
covenant,
temple thing?
well, we'll get to the covenant.
Oh, you mean the League of Suits?
Yeah, the League of Suits.
Okay.
The book describes it as like they're still in suits, but like they're all like Nosferatu looking vampires, like sunken in, high cheekbones, little rat things.
Yeah. I'm glad they changed that too, because again, it's just not, if there's vampires in your everyday life, that's obviously not what they're looking like.
Yeah. And if they're like supposed to be like these high echelon in societies, like if you look like a vampire and you're very rich and powerful, people are just gonna be like, yeah, like grow your hair out, or like, I don't know, eat a sandwich or something. You're a little pale and sickly looking.
Otherwise, it's giving Rat King from the Barbie Nutcracker animation movie. So,
bring me the Nutcracker.
That's not my first reference, but yes.
Yeah.
The Rat King from Barbie Nutcracker.
Which, alarming. Anyway.
At some point, if you remember Pearl, the big librarian vampire.
Yes, I want to know more about Pearl.
We'll get to Pearl, but he does have a reference at one point in here describing him as walking around with books in his hand. So that means at some point, because we'll get to Big Pearl, but at some point in the writing, in the original script, Pearl, I guess, was supposed to be like just a regular librarian-looking vampire.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and Mel didn't take that out. So then 30 years later, I point this out in your mistakes there, Mel. Sorry. Trying to get to Mel, because there wasn't a lot of changes when the cop showed up, beating up the cop and everything. So I'm not going to talk about that. We do find out that they're in Little Tokyo with this club where Pearl is.
Okay.
Now,
is there actually a Little Tokyo?
I did some research, and there technically is or was in the East Village, but it was like 1 or 2 blocks, and the stores were too sporadically like away from each other.
Right.
So there was at one point a place you could technically call Little Tokyo, but in New York, like it was like it lasted a very short time and doesn't really exist anymore.
Right. As resident tri-staters, I was just like, I've never heard of that before.
That's why I said like it's a book written by an Oklahoman based off a script
Is
of
that
a guy.
what they're called?
I have no idea. Based off of a script by a guy living in LA, which clearly, like, obviously, like, you have much more of a Tokyo influence there. The strip club that scene was in, it's run by vampires, but not all the people in there are vampires. As opposed to the movie, like, it was basically just like a big old vampire nightclub.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And this is like on top of the consistent talk about how when Black women are in danger or hurt, they're described as very pretty in the novel. The other one I really don't like is how Pearl's described. Every single time Pearl is referenced or told something happening to him, he is described as, quote, the fat Asian vampire, in that order.
I don't like that.
No, I didn't like it either. So the things we know about Pearl in this order is we know that he's fat, we know that he's Asian, and last but not least, we know that he's a vampire.
Yeah, here's my thing when it comes to these things. I am definitely not one to be overly sensitive because you want to describe a character, and maybe Pearl is of Asian
fat
descent,
Asian vampire.
Right? But when you put it like in that terms, it makes it feel.
And it was constant. And it was only like 5 pages long, but it's constantly like. And then Blade brought his gun out to against the head of the fat Asian vampire.
Yeah,
Karen brought the flashlight against the black Asian. I said black Asian. The fat Asian vampire. Like, it was just a constant thing. It was never at one point where Pearl is just Pearl.
Right.
We're big Pearl stans in this household.
Yeah.
Pearl deserves better. And Karen goes through a very quick characterization because if you remember, she was a bit of a baddie pretty much
the whole movie.
Yeah. But she spends a lot of times in the beginning as like very skittish. She talks to Whistler about like, no one owns the police. No one's that powerful.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, okay.
Yeah. And so like she's like very not knowing about anything and like very skittish about having guns. But then it's here with the fat Asian vampire, as the book would describe Pearl. She instantly puts on that flashlight and roasts him as like in the movie.
Yeah, but in the movie, she was already on that track. Like, I feel like the Karen in the movie, all she needed was this little experience to bring out that edge in her, for her to be like, yeah, that's my guitar voice. Like,
that's your guitar voice?
Yeah.
So in the library, there's that big fight scene after Pearl gets roasted, where Quinn loses another arm. At some point, Karen stabs him in the crotch with Blade's sword. Can't do that in the 90s cartoon. This is where we learn when they come back to the group with Whistler. Whistler is about the same as he is in the book and in the movie, so there's not a big difference there. Except... I'll get to that in a little bit. But we learn Whistler explains that Frost is about 200 years old, which honestly, it
doesn't make sense to me. The way he acts.
Yeah.
Like, to me, what's his name that we like with the hand?
Come on,
Quinn. It would make sense to me if like maybe he was like grew up during like after the Civil War, because of kind of how he like acts.
Yeah.
In a way, but I feel like part of the reason why we don't like Deacon is because he's such new blood, and maybe in terms of vampires, 200 years is new blood, but I feel like he's like more like the last 100 years. You know what I mean?
That exactly. Like if it was like between 80 and 100 years, I would totally be like believing that he's this arrogant little prick. Especially like his love for techno. I'm like, I can't see someone in the same era as Mozart and you're the smart one. What other classical musicians?
Oh,
Beethoven.
Yeah, but they're not all in the same era. But anyway, go ahead.
No, 1700s, right? You can't think of someone from the Revolutionary War still being like this after 200 years.
Correct, exactly. Because no matter how long you're out in public, in the general public, you would carry over a lot of what you grew up with when you were actually alive. So I just don't think that fits. Yeah,
it doesn't really buy it, really. But this is where it started to kind of click to me in the novel that like Whistler has so much more presence in the novel, even though his scenes don't really change. Blade, we get a lot of scenes of Blade's perspective, but it's always Whistler taught him this, Whistler told him that, Whistler taught him how to do this. And it becomes very grating because Blade in the movie isn't really, like, he doesn't talk much, but he has such a distinct personality and a distinct presence in there. And Whistler now has all this stuff in his head, always keeps talking about Whistler doing this and that. It almost becomes like Whistler's movie. Where Blade is now more than just like, he's no longer like a confidant or a friend or a protege. It's now Blade is Whistler's weapon against vampires.
Right, and in the movie, it's very much not that feel.
Yeah.
At all.
Like there's a friendship you feel between the two.
Yes, and camaraderie, friendship, and also like that Blade didn't really need him, but once he was, established, but they stayed together because of their desire for the work. And then they forged a friendship. Almost a father-son relationship in a way.
A little queer coding there, too.
Queer coding?
I mean, it is Chris Gofferson.
No, this is not one of those moments. I'm going to have to say no on that.
That was the joke that we made throughout the movie.
I know. But they were not one of those.
Did you think Blade liked Karen as like a romantic thing?
No.
No?
I really don't. I think that he was attracted to her. But I don't think, to me, in the movie, there was any indications that he wanted her to stick around.
Yeah. There was a Whistler explains everything, but he explains to Karen that like the reason why Blake acts kind of weird around her is because he does like her. And
That is so middle school.
see, I kind of like that idea for Blade as like an emotionally middle school like mindset. Like he's supposed to be someone born with vampirism, and he like it described in the book like vampirism activates during puberty, so he's like emotionally maybe still like that child where he's like, you know, everything's kung fu and tries to be like this disciplined thing, but when it comes to like talking to girls or like friendships opening up, like he sulks in that one scene in the movie, like he just sulks in the room, you like
Yeah.
so
I don't know. I'm not into that theory.
no okay, well, I guess we have to sign the divorce papers.
Oh, that's crazy. Anyway.
Your Honor, she didn't like the interpretation of Blade. So Karen eventually gets kidnapped by Frost and the gang, right? I'm pushing the plot along just to like talk about like the major differences. And she gets kidnapped, and then Frost is like, "You're really hot," which is, again, recurring theme in the book is like, everyone they really love the black ladies.
Oh
which,
boy. I mean, it is the 90s.
It is
Peak
the 90s.
of black actresses in a lot of movies. But anyway, that's besides the point.
And plus, you know, Frost has a type, we learn.
Yeah. That man is unhinged.
Blade has his Whistler Mercy killing, and he does get more lines, and this is what I talked about before about like Blade has more dialogue, but he feels less established now. Like all you need to do in the movie for Wesley Snipes was just take off your sunglasses and mope, and we can get all the emotion from there. In this one, he's like, "I can't, Whistler, I can't kill you," and Whistler's like, "Give me the gun, I'll do it myself."
Yeah. I think that goes to show, no offense to our Oklahoma friend, but it goes to show how rushed this project is, and also the lack of detail. Because in a good novel, you don't need the character to even speak, even though you can't see. How you have previously described them, the actions that they're taking, and your descriptions on the page is enough to know how they're going to react.
Yeah.
And because that hasn't been done in this novel, we have, "Oh yeah, you do it, man, I can't do it." That was my cornbread accent.
I didn't mean for this to be an Oklahoma rip. I'm sorry everyone there, except for everyone at Fort Sill. Y'all were something. So we go back to Karen and Frost, and Frost shows through like a psychic vision his plan, which was to raise a vampire god, become the vampire god, and have vampires rule the world. And when
I rule the world. That's a Nas song. Anyway, go ahead.
Karen asks, "So like if everyone's a vampire, how the hell are you going to drink blood?" And Frost is like, "Oh, I got that covered." And this was actually interesting for me as a horror fan. Have you heard of a movie called Daybreakers?
No.
It came out in like 2011, 2010. So yeah, Daybreakers came out, and everyone in the world's a vampire, and the last humans are put into like a vault, and in the movie, blood's kind of treated as like money. Like they slowly drain all the humans, and they try to keep it sustaining, but it's not sustaining. And when you don't drink enough blood as a vampire, you become like a weird demon bat thing. And so like this whole like class conscious thing is going on where like the least rich people who don't have enough blood supply are slowly mutating while the rich and powerful are trying to hoard all the blood for themselves.
That's a movie I would watch.
So I think I've heard years ago that maybe it was originally going to be a Blade sequel, where Blade comes back and everyone's a vampire and he has to like fight this new thing now, but then it became its own movie. But Frost shows Karen a scene where a human is tied up very similar to how they're in this vault in that movie. And I thought like, oh, so this was like the planting the seed for Daybreakers to me. So that was very interesting to me, and seeing it in this novel. Blade enters Deacon's room, and if you remember the movie, the room is like very like bare bones white with a weird like
pod. And it
weird
reminds
pod
me
bed.
of a freaking pod that I did. It's a sauna pod that helps you sweat it out before you go into a cryo chamber. That's exactly what it looked like.
So instead of the sweat pod cryo chamber in the book, so in the original script, it was again this like gothic, dark, heavy metal thing going on where there's like antique cherry wood chairs and everything. So we instead of that, that's what we have for here in the book, and this is where he meets his mom Vanessa, who is very much nowhere near as incesty as she is in the movie.
Yeah, that?
Your mother died a long time ago, Blade.
Yeah, no,
Little
I'm
nose
not your
thing.
mommy anymore. Like, not cute.
No, but there is a fun dichotomy here in some dialogue where Frost is like, I'm your daddy, Blade. But then later on when he's in the chamber and he tells Vanessa, take care of your son. So it's like, so you don't want to be a daddy no more. All right, Deacon, we got you. That scene where Blade is in the little chamber area.
Right, and
with
they're
his
draining his blood.
Yes.
Yeah.
One interesting thing was brought up, I think Quinn brought it up in the novel, was that like, yeah, we experimented with like humans and vampires in this chamber and like they don't fit. So like they talked about like, yeah, so we like carved pieces of them to make them fit. It's brutal, but like, hey, they're vampires. So.
Yeah.
So Karen frees Blade and tries to offer her blood. He's like, no. And this is what I mean with the whole Whistler, it's his story now. From Blade's perspective, quote, Whistler showed him the way. Whistler had been the only truth and parent he ever known. And it's like, this is after about 300 pages of just Whistler.
I'm wondering, is Blade black in the novel still?
Yeah,
okay.
He was always black from the very from the very first time in his issue to now.
Okay.
Like, so the original creator, he wanted to bring in more minority characters into his comics because he grew up in New York City, and he's like, I want it to reflect the New York City I grew up in.
Right. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. So we go to this fight scene at the tail end of it. Again, in the novel, it's basically the same as in the movie. So there's really no differences there. Talk about the blood coming in, dropping in, and making Frost into the vampire god. Karen gets her shotgun like in the movie. And she is much more active in the novel, shooting goons left and right.
Shooting goons? That's
Shooting
what
goons.
it says?
I think it's goons, yeah. I believe it was goons in the novel. And she's like, boy, I sure hope I hit humans because shotguns don't do much against vampires.
Oh, wait.
Yep.
Take away her license. She should not be a doctor. That's crazy.
Well, they're attacking Blade.
Yeah, I don't know.
She doesn't want to disappoint Whistler.
No, boy. His ever-present spirit.
His ever-present spirit. So when fighting Frost, there's a great part where Mel describes Blade's vision as like a tunnel vision, like it's hyper-focus, and I thought that was a really good line, and I wish there was more like it in the novel, as opposed to just Blade does this, Blade does that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when you're writing an action scene, I imagine like you gotta like really place this in the middle of the action. But then we get offshoot lines like, he's just so damn fast. It's like, that's not a good descriptor. And there's also, the other great line, some motherfuckers always try to ice skate uphill.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
That's in the book.
I like that line.
Yeah, it's a good line.
It's fun.
Yeah. Deacon does die the same way in the movie. I know in the original movie ending, they tried having him as like a red tornado, which was how in the books described as the vampire god, as this big giant red tornado. It just, the effect looked terrible. So they instead did the whole serum thing. So we are at the last scene of the movie in Moscow, where we have a vampire trying to suck the blood, and then Blade shows up speaking Russian, being all badass. And then roll credits. But there's a whole other scene in the novel, and I think this was the original ending for the script. So it is the same thing in Russia. There's a couple walking down. There's a guy who looks like he's homeless asking for a cigarette. Turns out the homeless-looking guy was a vampire that Blade was hunting. And then we have, dun dun dun, it's Whistler. He came back as a vampire.
Oh, I don't like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, like Whistler throughout the whole novel, he gets the last say of the book. Something along the lines of like, "Oh, this will be fun." It's like something lame like that.
That's so lame.
It is lame. And I know why they cut it because Chris Christopherson's such a good actor and the character was such a good idea to just kind of make him like, "Oh, now he's a vampire." Shock ending. Ooh.
Yeah, it just doesn't hit the same.
Yeah. So, what do you think about some of these changes?
I'm glad they made the movie. I'll put it that way. I don't want to slander the great state of Oklahoma any longer, but I'm not into it.
I think this isn't like, I don't think it's fair to really like make fun of Mel's writing style for this, because as he explains that like there's a lot of changes in the script and he had to go back and forth on it, which unfortunately is a thing that happens in some novelizations.
Right, and obviously that will mess up the flow of any writer, and then you're not given as much artistic space. Completely understand. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't mean it's good though.
Yeah. So as for Blade the character, he had 2 more movies with diminishing returns, though the second one I really do kind of like. And he has still going on with the comic book issues, and I picked up one of the recent ones, and it may have just been a bad issue, but it just screamed 90s in like the worst ways. No plot, all action. I didn't really care, but I did learn Blade has a daughter at one point.
Oh, is it with Dr. Karen?
I don't know. I don't think so, but that was actually kind of interesting.
It leads me back to my same question about the anatomy of vampires that I have in Twilight, that I will continually have. Again, I need a book on that, the anatomy of vampires.
I'll talk to some vampire nerds on the internet and see if they can find something. There was also the video game that you saw me play a couple times, Midnight Suns. Mm-hmm. Blade is a recurring character in that. He's like one of the better parts, I think. It's actually kind of cute how he works. He's still like that stoic, like, I don't want to talk to people, I don't trust people. But then in that game, you get to be friends with some of these superheroes, and the more friendship you have, the more they open up. So then Blade opens up to like how he likes Captain Marvel.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, like I like the idea of the Daywalker, the half vampire, like being smitten by someone who has the power of the sun.
How about we do this on the actual moon?
We could, but you might need to hold your breath.
You could hold it for me.
Like, that's kind of cute. And I kind of wish they go along with that more. Midnight Suns works because like it's just like a big giant soap opera. Mm-hmm. And I think for Blade, like they're trying to make a new movie, and I do kind of like that aspect of a big soap opera of like these bombastic characters acting out, and Blade being like an emotional child. I know you don't like that, but I think that's a fun thing to explore, where like, let's say in this hypothetical new Blade movie that's, hasn't come out yet, like Blade is alone and he's scary to both the vampires and the humans, and then he like meets a human that helps him out, and he learns to open up through the power of friendship.
And that's where you lost me. Good night, everybody.
Well, what would your hypothetical Blade movie be then?
I guess I like the concept of him working alone, or I want a prequel. I want before he met Whistler. That's what I really want. I need more depth of character and why he is the way he is. And maybe the 2 other movies have that, but I would like a prequel. That's what I think would be a good fan service. How does Blade become Blade? Did he always have this mission to go after vampires, or was it forged through fire?
I like that. I wouldn't mind seeing a Blade prequel.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, that's all I have for today with closing the book on Blade. I'd like to big thank you for my wife taking me on this journey, and we have our next movie online. Baby, what movie did you pick for us to do for light reading with?
We are doing 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. That's right. If you don't know it, look it up or wait for the video to come out. But I'm very excited. It is campy. It's a lot of things. It's campy. It's a musical. And it's a little weird. So we're going to have ourselves a time.
Strap in, everyone. And remember, after Seven Brides with Seven Brothers, you guys get to decide the next video that we're going to be doing a reaction to, and then we're going to be doing our closing the book on that as well. Until then, I'm CB Smith. I'm here with my wife,
TB Smith.
All right, and everyone, take care, and we'll see you in the next video.
Techno music.
Tell you about them sobbing women who lived in the Roman days. It seems that they all went swimming while their men was off to graze. Them women was sobbing, 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 fit to be tied. Every muscle was throbbing, throbbing from that riotous ride. Seems they cried and kissed and cried all over that Roman countryside. So don't forget that when you're taking a bride.